Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are so glad that you're here today as we talk about our Association Business Development Landscape Report. It's a great chance for us all to benchmark your association's business performance. Well, at PAR, we believe that the mission of PAR is business development. Business development is our mission, and revenue is what makes the missions of each of our individual associations obtainable. And if you are joining us today, then we know that you believe that too. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending this hour with us as we discuss a topic that we all love, which is association business development. My name is Carolyn Shomley, and I am responsible for PAR's online content and all of our virtual workshop programming. And today I will get the chance to moderate this discussion with our great panel of association executives who are joining us today. So let's go ahead and meet them now. Carrie Hartin is the President of Association Solutions for MCI, and Carrie is without a doubt the right person to be joining us today to talk about business development and why a strategic approach is needed. She says it best on her own LinkedIn page when she notes that today's event and association management space is in uncharted territory. To grow revenue in this dramatically changing landscape, you've got to stay on target, even when that target keeps moving, which is something all of us have experienced. At MCI USA, Carrie leads a team that generates revenue for more than 40 top associations across the United States. They provide a wide range of customized sales solutions in media, sponsorships, training programs, and more, so their client organizations have the funding they need to serve hundreds of thousands of members in law, medicine, education, and other key industries. Hello, Carrie. Thank you for joining us. And we also have with us today Erin Pressley. She is the Senior Vice President of Education, Training, and Events for NRECA, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. Erin will tell you that she enjoys the multifaceted nature of nonprofit organizations and busting through organizational silos. She is a doer who loves the details and also enjoys flying at 30,000 feet to develop the big picture. As Senior Vice President for Education, Training, and Events, Erin leads the organization's extensive meeting and events programming and education and training curriculum for nearly 900 electric cooperatives nationwide. And Erin joins NRECA following a 15-year career with the National Association of Convenience Stores. Hi, Erin.
Hello.
And finally, we have with us Soth. He is the chairman of PAR's Leadership Advisory Board and president of High Fidelity Group, a firm specializing in revenue development and strategy for partnerships, sponsorships, and exhibit programs. Soth has spent 25 years in association business development, running successful enterprise programs and launching associations along the way, including the Society for Clinical Research Sites, where he is the senior vice president of strategy and global business partnerships. Hey, Soth.
Hi, nice to see you guys.
Well, on this, as we get going on this next slide, you'll see some familiar faces in the photo on the left. Soth, that was taken back in May of 2019 when PAR kind of got up and running and the survey really took shape. Talk to us a little bit about where this all began and why we're here today.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, this was pre-pandemic. There was no gray hair at all from anyone on the Leadership Advisory Board. Yeah, we got together and talked a lot about some of the shared opportunities, challenges, and what would it look like if we could prioritize business development, align it with the mission that our organizations presented into their markets. And we came up with a couple of core areas that we shared in the survey with about 100 association, with over 100 association executives, things like workforce, things like tools, things like training, all the elements that go into creating and supporting a business development effort within your association.
All right, so the survey got underway, and here's a quick snapshot of some of the respondents. Soth, take us through some of the people we heard from.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the respondents is that we have a really nice, fair representation. I'd say about half are C-suite VP, deputy director level. It's very similar to many of the PAR member organizations. And then the remaining 50% is around directors or folks that I would call our revenue producers, people that are face-to-face with either, it could be that they lead events, could be that they are responsible for some form of non-dues, or maybe even the membership or education programs, similar to like Erin, who leads education. The other thing that I'll say about the demographic is just that we had about 10% of respondents had annual revenues over greater than $50 million. And the remainder, somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 to 20, was around 30%. And then the remainder would be under 10 million. So again, a pretty good swath of commercial application across the size of organizations that we were able to reach.
Great. Well, let's take a quick look at today's goals and what we plan to do over the course of the next hour. Statistics are great, but if we don't apply them and use them to understand how we're performing and areas that we need to improve, then they're really nothing more than just numbers on a page. So that's what today is all about. We're going to explore what these numbers mean and how we can use them to advance the association business development landscape. So throughout the presentation today, there are 3 assertions that we're going to go ahead and explore. And the first one is that business development strategy is critical for association revenue. The second one that we'll talk about is association revenue performance requires leadership at all levels. And the third thing that we're going to look into is the future of association revenue includes a skilled business workforce, tools, and new programs. So we'll be getting into strategy, leadership, and workforce. So to get things going today, we really hope that this can be a collaborative and interactive discussion. So we ask you guys to, be active in the chat and to help us with our polls, which are all anonymous. To get things going, we're going to go ahead and launch our first poll here. And the question is, which of the following best describes your association leadership's involvement in business development over the previous year, previous 12 months? Has it increased greatly, slightly? Is it about the same, or has it decreased? And we'll kind of get ourselves a little framework as we begin this discussion on strategy. So I see some responses coming in. Give it just another moment. And all right, so here are our results. It looks about 26% of you say it's about the same, 21% greatly increased, 47% slightly increased, and only 5% of you saying that it's been decreased. All right, so let's get our discussion going here when it comes to strategy. Those of you who said your association's leadership is greatly involved in business development over the previous 12 months, have they taken the step of developing an organizational business development strategy for your association? This is the first assertion that we're going to explore today. And successful for-profit corporations understand that revenue generation begins with strategy. Today, we're going to talk about why business development strategy is critical for association revenue. And in our PAR survey, we found that associations are not effectively strategizing. If you've seen the survey and you've been following us for the last few weeks, this is something that we've really been focusing a good bit on. 86% of respondents indicated that they had an underperforming business development strategy or none at all. So if you're in that 86%, obviously, you're in the majority right now. So PAR's goal is to drastically reduce this number of having more associations with effective strategy. So let's go ahead and start with our first chat, warm up the chat a little bit. As our team has explored this idea of strategy, we've seen that one of the biggest challenges is coming up with a shared definition, right? So how can we strategize if we don't quite know what it is? So let us know what your idea or your definition of a business development strategy is. Go ahead and drop it in the chat. And as those are coming in, Erin, let's start with you. How do you view strategy?
Sure. I think first I want to say, I'm not surprised that there's been an increase for the most part in the desire of senior leadership to get more involved in business development. I mean, the world has changed so much and there's so much external pressures. I read something today, if you're a CEO and you don't think a recession is coming, you're crazy. So I think there's just more intense pressure on generating revenue than there's ever been before. And I'm also not surprised too that there's a lack of business development strategy or underperformance of strategy. And I don't say that from a, haha, we have a strategy and you don't. I say that from a, I'm in the same boat as you guys, and we struggle to adhere to our business development strategy. I think we can all say it's hard to find time to take that breather and think about strategy when there's so much work that you have to do, right? Your events keep coming, your media sales deadlines keep coming, when you really pick your head up and have that chance to take a breath and be strategic. But I think making time to build that roadmap is critical, because otherwise you and your team are just kind of going through that hamster wheel. And I think in this time of wanting people to feel committed and engaged with their jobs, you have to give your team this vision of where you're headed so that they can feel engaged and be a part of something bigger than just, hitting the financial target. So my definition of business development strategy, I mean, it's really a set of intentional, deliberate choices that you make that are going to yield long-term sustainable growth for your business unit or for your company. I don't think it's something that should change dramatically year over year, because to me, that's not necessarily a strategy. But it's really, there's tweaks to it, but your goals and your path to get there, I think it's critical to really find the time to sit and build it out. Carrie, what do you think?
I think, Erin, I would echo the place of, it's been really hard for people to, I think, put time into strategy building, right? There is a lot of demand on revenue. It's hard to compete for market share. And so I think people get pulled down into the tactics super fast, right? And don't get to say, what is the strategy? And so when I look at that definition of strategy, I often think about, where exactly are we going to go and play, right, as an organization, and how are we going to win, right? So what markets are we going out to serve? How are we going to ensure that we represent them effectively? How do we ensure that we represent them in a really unique way? And then how are we going to win, right, the dollars and revenue that surround that business development strategy? And so, I love the place where you talk about it being a piece that has some fixed components to it. But when I think of strategy, I also think of the creative components that have to come into play, right? Like, you've got to be able to think about, how are we going to do things differently? What's happened in the past that informs our strategy? How do we adjust and change our plan today? How do we ensure that we've got the right resources in place for that strategy to be a winning one? For me, there are times that I've got to kind of take a step back and break out planning versus strategy. It's really easy to get wrapped up in a plan. In my household, you don't wake up on a Saturday morning without a plan of action for the day, as my poor children know. But that is just a plan. It is actually not a strategy in any way, shape, or form. That plan is just, a set of steps, right? How are we going to do these things in a sequential order that are going to get us to a place where mom potentially stops nagging us? Versus, right, an organization that may say, hey, we want to build a strategy to increase our sponsor-related revenue 25% over the next 3 years, right? And we want to do that with sustainable sources that aren't just going to come and go in any given year. And that strategy then is going to require a shared group of leaders and people within that organization to come together and say, what has the past taught us about how we've done this work before? How are we going to differentiate ourselves in that market? They're going to have to start to explore sort of different pathways towards that strategy before they pick, the direction that they want to head. And then they really need to be able to have kind of that shared idea and vision of growth, so that they've got something they're driving towards. They can adjust the plan along the way. But it is not just a sequential set of steps, right, to get from A to Z. It's about building the plan that will differentiate them and allow them to be able to win.
I think I love what you said about adjusting along the way, because I think that that's critical. I mean, there are external factors, new data that's unveiled, information you get from your members that will inform your strategy as it goes and grows. And so being able to adjust, I think is critical, because, as we know, times change, right? Things change. So, I think looking at that data and looking at the external forces and all of that is so important.
And having a safe place to have those conversations, right? Because it is a moving strategy, is just sort of this a little bit chaotic. It's not as firm as planning, to Carrie's point earlier, and it's got a little bit of a rough edge to it. I will tell you that I thought I knew a lot about strategy until we hit the pandemic. And then I realized that we were really good at planning and everything that goes into a plan, all the checklists that go into that plan, but that we needed a strategy to get us from point A through to point B, which was through that time. And that's when I kind of discovered Roger Martin, who I wanted to share with you guys today. So Roger is a strategist, great author. Some of you may have seen or read his book, Playing to Win. And he says, in short, strategy is the act of making an integrated set of choices which positions the organization to win. This is the defining factor of strategy, the win part. And it's a little different than planning. Planning is we're planning because we can control the plan. We know we sell something. Let's say it's an exhibit for our event folks on listening today. And you sell the exhibit, and you know that the next step is we're going to engage the exhibitor. We're going to make sure they're on the floor plan. We're hopeful finance sends that invoice out on time. We're hopeful that logistics are communicated in the right way. That's a plan that's moving forward, but then you don't have an event, right? So how does that strategy change? Roger goes on to say, while planning is the act of laying out projects with timeline, deliverables, budgets, and responsibilities, he echoes the fact that we are looking at how we're going to win as an organization together. And I share this story only because when I mentioned that we're not actually didn't really know about our complete strategy. At SCRS, Society for Clinical Research Sites, most of our work came around events. And during the pandemic, of course, we had this moment of challenge where all those plans, well, they went out the window. And I remember kind of coming into a conference call, a Zoom meeting, to discuss what we were going to do about it. And for a moment, we have just like everyone else, different departments: education, member engagement, events, sales, and of course leadership and education. But like through that, what were we trying to do? What did we need to survive? Well, we agreed that we're really good at getting people together and connecting and supporting those folks. And during the pandemic, that meant that we were connecting members. So how could we do that? Could we take the spirit of a meeting and boil that down into a new experience that we could share over the course of time? So our strategy just became about connecting our audience for site success. That was it. That was all it was connect. How can we do that to a degree that was above and beyond anything we had done before, and how can we let that strategy inform our work? We sort of stumbled upon this idea, and what it did was, for the first time ever, everyone in the organization knew what our budget was. We didn't have a reserve, so we knew we had to get creative around finding ways to revenue. And when we're talking about site success and connecting everyone, we need to create business opportunities that maybe wouldn't have existed without SCRS being the platform to have those kind of conversations. it really allowed us to bring all of those departments together. I know we talk a lot about silos in the association market, and I think one of the number one challenges that PAR members will share or send in usually have to do with I'm frustrated because I'm in this silo, no one else seems to get it. This is where strategy and saying how do we help our team win, it does bring people together. It does help them contribute into the pieces of the puzzle that matter most. And so for us, it helped us come out from the pandemic with stronger partner programs, stronger member programs. We invested time into member benefits and changed those along the way. And it was really exciting to have the full year of 2022. We almost we did have an event impacted by COVID even last year at the beginning of the year. But because we had made these changes, it positioned us for greater growth and a little bit more risk tolerance than maybe we would have normally had. And it allowed us to introduce some new cool programming into the market, along with some other really great opportunities for partnership and of course, event driven revenue.
Thanks, Sean. So from the chat, it looks like we have a lot of great definitions that came in, and all of them kind of follow the same pathway that Carrie identified as just finding a way to win in the market. And strategy can feel overwhelming, but that's a great place to begin, of just simplifying it and letting your plans flow from that. So our business development strategy takeaways, Sean, take us through that and just where some association teams can begin in this specific category.
Sure. And I know, again, strategy has rough edges. So if you're like, the strategy you had was connecting everyone for site success, it was. And it changes all the time what it means. All the time it changes. But our shared aspiration was to do it better than anyone else in the market. And could we do it during the challenging time and not being able to get together? So in your market, start with a shared aspiration or objective that will define the work for everyone. How do they play a role in getting to the win? Identify the roles each contributor plays in that objective. So let's say you've got a conference coming up and part of your strategy is we want this to be the best event we've ever had. Well, what does that mean? Get granular. First think large and then get granular. Like if we're going to have the best event we're ever going to have, how does finance play a role? How does membership play a role? How does that attendee experience when they register play an important role? It is all part of that shared strategy. And it's wonderful to watch folks that maybe didn't even know what you do as a revenue producer. It's kind of wonderful to have them be invested and invited into your world. You're all on the same team, but we've maybe been playing to win a little differently. And so identifying the roles that each contributor can play really helps with that shared aspiration. And then again, lastly, just agree to measures of success. So I know Erin and Carrie mentioned a little bit about getting the team together and having conversations. You need to be able to repeat that on the regular in a safe environment where people don't feel judged or misrepresented, or that there's not a lot of complaining. Hard to do, but we like to say, bring solutions, not gripes. And when it comes to measuring it, one thing that we've learned is that we've got a little bit of work to do in the systems that support revenue development. So the PAR landscape report actually talks a lot about customer relationship management and what types of information we're gathering. Well, we just need to have a place to talk about that and make sure that the conversation is revisited over and over and over again, so people can explain what they've done since the last time you met and what they're going to do next.
Thanks, Sean. So if strategy requires leadership, then our next assertion moves into the topic of leadership, and that's that association revenue performance requires leadership. And what we see in some of our next findings is that association leaders definitely have a challenge ahead of them. So in our first slide here, there's two findings that we'll look at to begin this discussion. First, we asked our survey respondents what programs hold the highest priority for revenue. And as you see here, these answers illustrate that organizational priority follows traditional revenue streams. So we see membership ranking there up at the top with 87%, event registration at 67%. So this is kind of where we stand right now in terms of the priority that associations are placing in different revenue streams. At the same time, we asked which programs will achieve budget. And so you see here that less than half of the respondents in each of these categories expect to meet budget in some of these key areas. So while 87% of respondents ranked membership as a high priority for revenue, only 48% expect to meet that budget. So this kind of starts our discussion in leadership and the vital role that association leadership has in charting the course of their revenue priorities within an organization. So let's get started, Carrie, and talk about the role that forecasting, I know one of your favorite topics, what role does forecasting play in setting and meeting budgets in different revenue categories, and what do leaders need to know about it?
I think there are a few things that leaders need to know, right? And if you look at that previous slide and just some of the gaps that are there, 48% of organizations actually meeting their forecasting number on something like membership. It just goes to show how far we have to go, especially coming out of a huge market disruptor like a pandemic. It causes us to need to question so many pieces around forecasting. So I'll highlight a couple of things that I think are really important when I think about the leadership role, how that ties back to forecasting. When I think about the role of a leader, I think it is their job to ultimately set the path on how that budget can be achieved. So a few things. In order to forecast effectively, you've got to be close to the data. You just can't be divorced from it, right? And we've seen those notes in a few places, right? Sean referenced it a few minutes ago as it relates to systems. In the chat, there are a few references to it as well, especially if we think about, the data components that might sit across silos of an organization, where you could find yourself even at times double dipping on sources of revenue if there's not enough clarity there. So when I think about it, I think you've got to have leaders that are comfortable in sitting with the data, understanding the data, taking the time to understand and learn the nuance of it, because that data will inform a lot of different things. It'll inform the pricing strategy that somebody's bringing forward. It'll inform the inventory that is being made available. It will inform the way that you create clarity and transparency across an organization. Even getting back again to some of the notes in the chat on the silos, right? Your ability to have clear and open access to data, the forecasts, the tracking and trending to those numbers can create a much more collaborative environment versus a competitive environment. And then, other places beyond the data that I think about, just really is critical to the role that a leader might serve in ensuring that a forecast can be delivered. I think about their ability and capacity to ensure that either they or somebody else senior on the team has done modeling to ensure that those forecasts are built on an actual plan and they understand the drivers within that plan. The modeling that comes in there can allow somebody to set some benchmarks along the way. It's really easy to be off kilter with a forecast. If you set that number 6 to 9 or 12 months out from the start of your budget year and you don't come back and look at it regularly, and you don't know the touch points you need along the way to stay on track with that number. And so I think it's really important that they put those guide rails in place as well for the team. And then the last part of that, when you think about business development, is that ensuring that the right people understand what numbers they're responsible for as part of that, that they've collaborated, they've given their input, they've brought their market knowledge, and they understand their role and responsibility. And so, in some organizations, that could be one person that's responsible for the entire business development strategy and the team that delivers the work across the organization. But in other associations, that's not a landscape, right? You've got the person that owns education and certification, and they're the ones that ultimately have to own that revenue stream, right? And having then the ample supports and resources to be able to grow, a really important source of revenue. in a significant way. So I don't know, there's a lot in there, but I think the leadership role is a really critical one to ensure that you can stay on path with a number or just, along the way.
I want to point out too, like you mentioned it, I tried to mention it. I like the way you articulated it in that you have to be able to come back to these touch points to review your performance around forecasting. So I was just curious how often, Carrie, Erin, you guys come together to talk through numbers and just where things are headed.
Yeah.
Without being overwhelmed. I guess that's the other.
When I think about reporting numbers, either to clients or the internal management of those numbers on the revenue that's developed, really it's looking at them critically at least once a month. And then it's probably updating them once a quarter if needed, unless there's something substantial that's changed before then. And I think it's really important that people have the mindset of trying to understand, right, if we're going to have to adjust a forecast for some reason, clarity on the why that needs to be done. And then also if there are other drivers, right, that can be managed along the way, maybe it's an expense portion or something else. And so it's being close to the numbers all the time, making adjustments, like giving yourself enough time and space to really understand the adjustments that you need to make in a forecast. Erin, does it look different for you?
No, it's about the same. I think that kind of monthly look so you can be nimble, but then quarterly so that you can kind of adjust your forecasting as needed. I'll give you one piece of advice too, all of you listening, make friends with your CFO and have some friends in the finance department. I think, sometimes business development folks are not in the leadership position, but yet you provide such a critical function for your organization. And so being able to lead from where you are, making those strategic relationships work for you in your organization. And really a lot of what I've had to do over my career too is educate my colleagues on why I'm setting these forecast numbers, why we're making some changes, what the market is looking like. So a lot of my role has been, kind of waging an internal PR campaign for business development so that my CEO and other leaders and other folks really understand the what and the why of what we're doing. And many times I present a budget and some targets and I'm told like, okay, can you increase that by $100,000? And really not understanding maybe the science or the finessing, I guess, that went into creating that forecast. And so I think that kind of educating, and to Bruce's point that he raised earlier, and I think we talked about it too. I mean, this is an organizational, it was even in the quote, Sean, that you shared from Martin, it's an organizational win. It's about having association revenue goals and not just department revenue goals. And so being able to have that relationship with your CFO or the finance team, maybe that ally can help you educate the rest of the organization that this is really about the organization and not maximizing one particular business unit.
100%. I think one of the other things that I learned over the last few years, particularly from Roger Martin, is he has this great question. What must be true for you to win? So let's take that $100,000 throw out that you get. I get that a lot too. Why is the budget 4 times what it's ever been? Well, I'm confused. How are we doing something different? Well, let's explore it for a minute. What must be true? You have the same pair of hands. Can they pick 4 times the amount of apples? Maybe they can, but what must be true? Well, the website has to be up earlier. The programming has to be up earlier. Your board had to agree 3 months ago on these products. Keep asking the question, what must be true? Now, some people might think that would introduce conflict. It doesn't. It introduces collaboration. It's in the way we share it, everyone. Carrie and Erin shared that they're meeting and talking about that performance regularly. In our report, which everyone can, the report is completely free. We only just ask that you share your information with us to download it. So if you haven't, just know it's available on mypar.org. I'll ask my team to please post a link to it. But there's a great slide that talks about sunk data opportunity. And in that part of the report, we learned that only 35% are tracking performance versus budget. So what must be true to increase your performance? Well, that's a team conversation to have. It might not just be about making more calls or getting more members through the door. It may be larger opportunities to connect and bring those ideas in.
Great points, everybody. Sean, I love that what you said, what must be true, and don't be afraid of it. It actually invokes collaboration, you know, when you call it to the table. Sticking with this topic of leadership, we're going to move into this next finding that we found. And, you know, Carrie, you mentioned expanded opportunities for business, and now more than ever, there's several different opportunities. Revenue can come from all different places, as this slide shows. We asked our respondents to select the program with the most growth potential over the next 2 years. And as you see here, non-dues advertising and partnerships leads the way, but we also have membership, education and certification, non-dues meeting sponsorships, and so on. So this goes ahead and leads us into a discussion on risk tolerance within our association. So before we discuss this aspect, I'm going to throw up another poll for everybody. And this poll is going to ask you, let me launch it, what is the level of risk tolerance within your organization? And we'll talk in a minute why this is important, but is it high? Are you actively seeking new revenue streams and your understanding of what that risk is and the patients involved? Is it moderate or is it low? Are you reluctant to approach new revenue opportunities? So take a minute to answer that, and I'll share those results in just a moment, and that'll kind of frame up this next discussion on risk and the role that leadership plays there. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty moderate group. Moderate saying that you seek innovation, but you're a little bit resistant as an organization to all that it entails. So let's move on to this discussion, and we'll talk about why it's vital to understand the risk tolerance of your association as it pertains to revenue and exploring some of these new revenue streams. Erin, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think to me, when I hear risk tolerance, it really to me is baked into the culture of your organization, right? You know, don't just say innovation is one of your company's values, but are you actually doing innovative things? You know, are you creating a culture where there is an opportunity to test and learn, right? To have that iterative process that Carrie mentioned before, right? You know, try something. If it doesn't work or you get new data, can you pivot a little bit and do it in a different way going forward? So to me, I think a lot of risk tolerance is in kind of the culture of your organization. Carrie, what do you think about that? I mean, does that sound on track?
I think it does sound on track. And I think it can develop over time, right? That, you know, collectively as an organization, are people willing to take risk and understand what that means? How much risk is staff and team able to take? How much risk is the board able to take? Sometimes think this gets driven a bit at the board level. And sometimes that just comes back to the type of professional or industry that is represented and how those people in their daily life look at and approach risk. You know, one of the things that I think has been incredibly effective, and quite frankly, the pandemic gave us space to get so much better at this, was the idea of let's try, figure out, adjust. If it's a fail, let's kill it quickly and move on. If it can be successful, let's adjust it and improve upon it. And so I think that's allowed organizations and teams to develop a mindset that can serve this really well. The one piece I would say is, you know, kind of going back to what Sean had said earlier, and a little bit of that, you know, what must be true. You know, if an association is saying, great, we're going to take a ton of risk because we need to develop this new source of revenue, we need to develop it really fast, then it's critical that it's built on a plan that is well resourced. And sometimes organizations, they're in distress, will start to make really risky decisions that are under-resourced and don't have an ample plan that can allow them to navigate and negotiate if there is trouble that comes down the road. And so it's just, I think, the other piece that has to come with risk. Sometimes people make risk sound, exciting, right? Or sexy, like we're a risk-oriented organization. But is there the ability and tolerance and foundation to be able to do that well?
Yeah, and I think that's at the crux of the kind of difference between, strategy and planning, right? I mean, yeah, we're going to make $100,000 more dollars, right? We're just going to sell more ads. We're going to sell more booths. We're going to sell more registrations. But it's the how and the choices you make to get from, and I guess it is the what must be true. What is it that has to happen in order to do that? You can't just run faster to get there. That's not the plan. It's the deliberate choices you make to reach out to new audiences or to try new things that'll get you to that extra 100,000.
And it might, and that path may not meet the culture of your organization. Like healthcare, I work primarily in healthcare. And for us, the idea of sales and it's just not it's a curse word. Sometimes you have to think about partnership and investment. And well, if that's the case, then our products need to meet the market with that ideal. And so does the support that we're having around that leadership. So, as association leaders, I know there's a lot on the line. I know there's many who tune in to PAR through their membership. I think the thing to take away here as you begin to look at some of this leadership time that we've already talked about is making sure you are making time for that strategy and being okay that you might not land on it. It is good to, I think that's an area where risk tolerance is welcomed because, like I said, strategy is not about like we're planning for a great show in Denver. Okay, here's the 17 things we need for a great show. No, it is how do you have the best show you can have this year to set you up for the next 5 years? How do you have that kind of an experience? Let's strategize around that. So think about that strategy and making time for it. Letting it be a little risky is okay. Making sure we're incorporating feedback, of course, not only from each other, but also our other stakeholders in the market. So, we look at 21st century association leadership as being emotionally and situationally prepared for tough conversations with new stakeholders and being able to present value. These are some of the things you're going to see come out through PAR and other organizations over the next few years as we prepare our workforce for new ways to stand up. You guys hit the nail on the head about data transparency and reporting, and I loved Carrie's note about we can't be divorced from the data points. So if you're going to say that we need to increase the revenue by 3 times, great. What does the data show that shares that? And what if on the flip side, what if we could improve revenue by 300% or whatever it might be with some new changes? What must be true for that to happen? Explore that a little bit, see where you land.
I will add one thing to that, Sean, which is that I think that for people that lead sales teams and organizations, it's important to help your salesperson get comfortable with that. They often hear a big ask, right? And they shut down quickly and they don't even want to work through the process then of the critical questions of like, what would it take for that to be true? How could that be true? All of those pieces. And so, again, when you think about incentive, right? And you think about these other pieces, I think there are places where leaders have to help their sales team, the person on the front line, get comfortable with some of that as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this in just a few minutes, but the role of the sales, the business developer, the revenue producer, it should be about producing revenue, not managing the 70 other things that go along because we all wear a lot of hats at our associations. Be thinking about what must be true for these things to happen. All right, Carolyn, I know we're moving on. We want to make sure
yeah,
that
that's a great As you mentioned, that's a great segue into our third and final assertion that we're making today, and it's all about the workforce. So, the future of association revenue includes a skilled business workforce, tools, and new programs. So, before we dive into the data on this topic, we have one more poll question to ask you. This is a two-part poll question, and it has to do with staffing. So, hold on a minute. Technical, there we go. All right, I'm launching this here. And our first question is, how has your association's staffing changed since 2020? Do you have more staff focused on business development, less staff focused on business development, or is it the same number of staff? And then secondly, which of the following best describes your current business development team? Outsourced? Are they in-house? Or are they both outsourced and inside sales? So as these answers come in, this will frame our final discussion here, and that's on workforce. And we do have an upcoming workshop coming up next month on this exact topic. And I know Carrie McIntyre, you're on the line here today. She'll be leading us through that discussion. So be sure to tune into that. Okay, so our poll results here, it looks like 57% of you say you have about the same number of staff focused on business development now versus in 2020. And then as far as your current business development team, 65% of you have it within your association, and then 35% have a combination of outsourced and inside sales. All right, so let's move on to this discussion. And first, we're going to go ahead and look at some data that we acquired in our survey about this. We'll put that poll into some context. These next two slides go hand in hand. So first, we asked which elements of business development need most improvement. And 51% of our respondents said that their business development practices would improve if they had more staff focused on it. So 51% say more staff focused on business development. Other options there you see collaboration with other departments is a big one as well. But we're going to focus in on the staff part of it, and that goes hand in hand here with our question that we asked is what's in the way of revenue performance? And the top answer there, 33% says staffing and resources as the greatest obstacle to revenue performance. So guys, how do associations find the right staff? I mean, you've mentioned, Carrie, just a few moments ago, you're charging them with doing all of these things to help increase revenue. Do we need more staff? Do we need the right staff? What do you make of these two slides here?
Yeah, I would say yes to both in some places, right? There are places where it really just does come down to there's not enough power, right? Sales time and talent and power to generate the revenue. But in order for that assertion to be accurate and fair, you've got to be able to look at the work that's getting done and say, you know, we're able to, we don't have a product issue, we don't have a marketing issue, we don't have a market issue, right? All of those things are performing really well. We have a volume issue relative to what we're able to go after and get in the market. So sometimes that can be true, but I think it's also a place where people will jump to I need more staff to develop more revenue, and that is not always the case. Sometimes you need a different mix of staff. Sometimes you need different staff, a different mix of staff, a different mix of resources, right? Sales is an ecosystem these days. Sales and marketing fit together hand in glove. There's data that drives their actions. There's so much you can do to help a salesperson really maximize the time they spend outward facing with customers and prospects. And so I would look at the full ecosystem of what is needed in order to bring a sales effort to life and really have it be successful. And then when I'm hiring is hard. Hiring is hard for everything these days. I swear it's not just you, it's everybody. But the ability to find talent that really does have a flexible mindset, right? That they are able to be creative in the way they think. They are able to move both fast and slow in different places. They are able to take direction, but also then quickly understand where they need to lead and set the plan on their own. That along with just a person who can be highly collaborative is ultimately what we look for, because I think those individuals can sell these products for you today. They can sell different products for you tomorrow. They can listen well in the marketplace. And so don't always assume that it's just a staffing issue though.
Yeah. I'll say, I'm gonna put in a plug because we have a vacancy for a director of business development at my association right now. So please join us. But I agree with everything that Carrie said too. I mean, it's a tough market out there. As she was talking, I was wondering too, is it easy, or how is easy, or how difficult is it to find a business development person, maybe even from outside the association space, to join the association space? And is there an acknowledgement that there's, it's a really interesting and different and more engaged community of folks to be selling to. And so there's a lot of benefits to that. I think, as we're talking about the skills that are needed and that we look for, Carrie, you mentioned many of them, and we talked about a lot of them already too, right? I mean, it's someone who has a healthy level of risk and wants to kind of try new things and test and learn, someone who's comfortable and understands what the data is telling him or her, someone who's a collaborator, right? Who can look, to partner with other departments, and someone who's more of an enterprise and a systems thinker, right? And can kind of see those opportunities across the organization and tie things together. Sometimes I've worked with salespeople who are so focused on their clients to the expense of the health of the association or the business itself, right? I mean, they almost are a little brainwashed in the service to their customers, which is great. But being able to also say, okay, what's good for the business as well, I think is critical.
Yeah, I would agree. The salesperson often has to represent on behalf of that relationship that they've been cultivating. But there really is a difference in understanding who you represent primarily in that equation, right? And so it is the association, right? That is that primary stakeholder in that relationship.
I would just add too that this position, as more associations bring on leadership into the C-suite, that a lot of companies have chief revenue officers that often are the next step to the CEO, and the reason for that is they are intimately aware of what all the departments are doing to win. And with our work as mission focused and driven organizations, our core of work is around the success of our members. And I know I know sometimes it's hard to align that with how we're going to produce revenue. But the reality is, if we're as this position evolves, as association business development evolves into really 21st century thinking, I think you're going to see a lot more folks with that business curiosity, Carrie. But organizations need to move away from playing just to play and going into what Roger Martin calls playing to win. And because of that, you're going to see the need to have more competencies and awareness around activities like intentional leadership, becoming the guide for their customers, a number of other different areas. I see Carolyn's moving me along here, but like
this is your natural segue, Sean. I mean,
right
everything
on.
you're talking about, and Brittany in our chat just talks about the key being to hire, develop, train for sales, and that leads right into what we're talking about here. Not only once, in advance of the hire, but ongoing professional development. Talk about that and wrap us up on our workforce takeaways.
I just want to leave one other thing about that, about revenue producers, my folks in the trenches. This position is geared and largely evaluated on performance, where a lot of other positions, like I don't mean to keep pulling in my finance folks, but I'm only going to get accounting. I have to do the best I can at accounting. Like the job just needs to get done, or I'm filling out whatever competency we're talking about, the work just needs to be done. With sales or business development as an enterprise, that work has to perform. It has to course correct. It has to work additional hours, and it has to be, as the position evolves, so will the compensation models. I know a lot of folks are, we're actually working, if you're interested in joining us, by the way, we are working on a workforce research right now that will help associations make informed choices about compensation models and how we're actually positioning that performance to win. So anyway, we have this slide up about what it takes. It takes an investment in both professional and personal growth. I know both Carrie and Erin are dedicated to that at their organizations, and we are too. It needs to be well-versed in that customer experience and equipped to improve it always. Not just, I saw this great note in the chat. It's not just about order taking, it's about order making. And what I mean by that is we might have a lot of times, I remember the old model, you just sort of say, I'm open for business. Let all the exhibit booth sales or directory listings or whatever you're positioning, come on in. You know how that's happening now? Very, very little. Why? Because all those organizations, including our members, have other choices, other commitments, other opportunities. And so improving that has to be a core part of where we are as a workforce. And then, of course, we talked about that performance mindset already.
All right, so we've gone through our strategy, our leadership, our workforce. Sean, kind of wrap it all up for us, and I'll let everyone know we have a few minutes left. If you want to drop any questions in the chat, anything we didn't cover, go ahead and do that. But Sean, what must be true for our associations to really make impactful changes to business development, and they can use the data that we've shared today to start to guide that discussion?
Well, first, read Roger Martin's book. It was great. I wish I had that 20 years ago. But I will tell you that what must be true, I think we need a shared aspiration to start with. If you take nothing from today, aside from that segment around getting together and talking about what a shared aspiration can do, a shared business aspiration. And that business aspiration could be all types of different things, but something that informs your people, your process, and eventually your business or revenue. That's what that aspiration will do. We need our leadership to be intentional, and we need the leadership to be at all levels. If you're a revenue producer on the line or listening later, having the ability to share or lead in what you do, how you contribute is so critical. And not only does it make you feel like a valued member of the team or your organization, it really is what our customers are looking for to help guide them through choices and opportunities themselves. And then a business development workforce that is informed, not only in the industry. We have a great slide in the report, talks about we're not doing a great job of helping our business development workforce with things that actually develop business. We're doing a lot of other training, which is great, but there are needs in the market for some qualified opportunities to learn and develop how we talk and work with customers and how we help our colleagues understand that role. So they're also invested in. So making sure they're not the only person doing the work and reporting the work, but they're working with and for the association's aspiration.
All right, well, we have reached the end of our hour. That was a whirlwind, so much great information. Carrie, Erin, Sean, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your insights and helping us move ahead in the world of association and the landscape that we all face. If you enjoyed today's conversation, then you'll definitely enjoy our in-person meeting coming up in December in Annapolis, Maryland. That's when we come together, all of us at the Rev Up Summit, and we share even more ideas on business development. And as so many people said that attended last year, it really is a home for association business development and all the people that conduct the important work of revenue. So join us. You can log on to our website, revupsummit.org, for that. And a quick reminder that our next virtual workshop is May 17th. We'll continue this conversation on staffing and managing a successful sales team. So join us then. And I put in the chat just a moment ago, we'll send an email out tomorrow with a recording of today's presentation as well as the slides. And as you log off today, 2 quick questions will pop up, a quick survey. Speaking of surveys that we would love you to answer if you have the time, that always helps us improve our work to make sure we're providing you guys with the best content that we can. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, Carrie, and Erin. Let's go.
Thank you.
How about you
Thanks,
guys? I'm
everybody.
excited. Let's get to work.
Bye.
Get to work. Bye, everyone.